I, 35M, am filing for divorce from my wife, Tessa, 28F, after she invited her ex over for dinner, humiliated me in front of him, and compared me to him. Now, everyone says I'm wrong for wanting to leave. Tessa and I have been married for 5 years and have a 4-year-old son. We met in grad school when I was finishing my master's and she was an undergrad. After we got married, I quit my job, but when our son was 6 months old, I had to go back to work because Tessa's income alone wasn't enough for the 3 of us. This caused a lot of arguments because Tessa felt it was an insult to her, like I didn't trust her abilities. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her, but I just thought 2 incomes would be better. Eventually, she understood and realized it would let her take time off to be with our son. The downside was that I ended up doing both my job and all the housework. Tessa is a personal trainer, and she thinks her job is more physically demanding than mine because I have a desk job. She said I should handle most of the chores because I don't do physical work. Even though I worked longer hours, she expected me to do more at home. We agreed at first that she would help with some chores, but I would come home to a half-done job, and her excuse was always that she was too tired. We fought a lot, and eventually I gave up and started doing everything myself to avoid arguments. This caused me so much stress that I started smoking, and Tessa mocked me for it, saying I was just showing off how stressed I was. I spent the last couple of years like this, dealing with her constant comments about my cooking, which wasn't great because she never helped with meal prep. I kept going for the sake of our son, knowing that leaving would hurt his life. Finally, last year, I hired a maid and paid her myself, but Tessa mocked me for that too, saying it made me look bad as a homemaker. She would always compare me to her father, her uncles, and other men she knew who seemed to manage both work and home easily. I would argue that those men probably had supportive wives, but she would laugh it off and tell me to relax, saying it was just a joke. That only made me angrier. Although we had some good times, what stuck with me were the moments when she really got under my skin. I had been thinking about divorce for a while, and last week, I finally snapped when Tessa invited her ex-boyfriend, Luca, 28M, over for dinner. Luca was her high school sweetheart, and they were together for almost 6 years before breaking up because they were going to different colleges. She ran into him at the grocery store, found out he had moved into our neighborhood, and invited him over for dinner without asking me, which was strike one. I knew they had been a big deal in high school because her friends would tease her about it even after we got married, but I wasn't ready for how flirty and friendly Tessa acted during dinner. She was clearly trying to get under my skin, and it was working. That was strike 2. Then came strike 3. She started joking about how bad I was as a husband and how lucky I was to have my job as an excuse for my awful cooking skills. She made these jokes because Luca is a stay-at-home dad of 2 daughters, and she kept implying that he was better than me at everything. She even told me that Luca was at the grocery store buying ingredients for a French dish for his wife, and joked that I would never do something like that. She also mentioned my smoking, saying I was just trying to show off how stressed I was, unlike Luca, who did everything perfectly. By then, I was fighting back tears, but I didn't want Luca to see me cry, so I just smiled through it. It was humiliating, and by the time I served them ice cream for dessert, I had made up my mind to leave. That night, I waited until Tessa went to bed. I usually do the dishes at night and don't go to bed until she's asleep, so it wasn't unusual for me to stay up. Once she was asleep, I packed clothes and necessities for myself and our son, called a cab, and went to my parents' house. It was almost midnight when I arrived, and as soon as my mother opened the door, I tried to explain myself, but I ended up crying, and it made my son cry too because he was confused and cranky. I had to bring him with me because I wasn't sure Tessa could care for him properly while I was gone, and I didn't want to leave him behind. My parents took us in without question, and after putting my son to bed, I was able to calm down and tell them everything. The next morning, Tessa called me in a panic, asking where I was. When I told her the truth and said I was filing for divorce, the panic in her voice went away, and she started laughing. She told me to stop being dramatic and just come home. That made me so angry that I yelled at her, calling her lazy, selfish, and incompetent. I told her I'd rather be single for the rest of my life than go back to her. That made her realize I was serious, but instead of apologizing, she started arguing with me, saying I was overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. She claimed she was just trying to lighten the mood with her jokes, and that I shouldn't take them seriously. The thing is, her jokes weren't funny. They were mean, especially considering I was already doing my best. She pushed me to my limit every day. When she realized it wasn't just about the jokes, she started playing the victim, accusing me of leading her on because I had been planning to leave for a while, and this was just a final straw. Now, all our friends are texting me, telling me I need to think about our family and put them first instead of myself. They say I shouldn't destroy our marriage over a few jokes. I tried to explain that they don't know the full story, but they keep insisting I shouldn't end my marriage over this. I posted everything online to explain myself, which seemed to calm some people down. Tessa saw it too and said that if these were my problems, I should have told her and she would have worked on them. But I've been telling her these things for years and nothing changed. It felt like talking to a wall, and now I'm just done. After that post, she started saying she would change and be a better wife if I gave her one more chance. She got some friends to try to convince me to stay, promising she would change. But the fact that she's involving our friends feels like she's trying to pressure me into not divorcing her, which feels manipulative and childish. I don't believe she can change anymore because I've given her countless chances and she never did. Even if I stayed, she might try to improve for a few months, but eventually she would go back to her old ways. I'm tired of being a single father with a wife who doesn't help. I don't think she's a good role model for our son, and I don't want him growing up in a home where her behavior is normal. I stayed with her for so long for our son's sake, but now I'm leaving her for the same reason. 2 days ago, I filed for divorce, and today, she was served. She's furious, mostly because she didn't want a divorce, and also because I filed for full custody of our son and requested to keep the house. The house was a wedding gift from both our parents, so I think it's fair that either I keep it or we sell it and split the money 60-40, with me getting the larger share. I believe I deserve the larger share because I've worked full-time, raised our son, and done all the household chores without her help. I'm not asking for alimony, so I think it's a fair request. But Tessa says I'm being unreasonable, and that even if I want a divorce, I shouldn't have filed for full custody, because our son is just as much hers as mine. That's fair, but I don't think she's capable of being a good mother. I haven't tried to take away her visiting rights. She can still see our son whenever she wants, but I don't think she should have him full-time. She called me after being served and told me I was being crazy and overreacting. She said she didn't agree with the divorce, and now that I was demanding full custody in the house, she thought I was being hysterical and not thinking clearly. When I explained that I had thought this through and it wasn't an easy decision, she broke down crying, which was very awkward for me because she's not usually emotional. She was sobbing, saying she never thought she could lose me, and that's why she'd taken me for granted. She begged me to give her one last chance to prove she could be a good wife and mother. It was hard for me to stay firm, but I had to tell her my decision was final and that she was realizing things too late. I couldn't go back to that life. She cried even harder, and for a while I just stayed on the call, trying to console her, which felt weird and uncomfortable. Eventually, she stopped crying and said she would never forgive me or herself if our son suffered because of this. I assured her this was just a temporary arrangement, and when our son is older, we can revisit the custody agreement. I told her that this would be hard for both of us, but we just had to make the best of it and stay strong for our son's sake. Then she suddenly hung up on me, and I didn't hear from anyone for the next few hours. However, now all our friends are texting me, telling me what I'm doing is wrong and that I need to reconsider my decision. They say that since Tessa's begging for one last chance, I should really think about it instead of being cold-hearted and only thinking about myself. At first, it was just a few people, but now it's almost everyone we know. I've started to wonder if I'm the one in the wrong here. I don't even know anymore. Am I wrong for filing for divorce and requesting full custody of our son because she doesn't help me? Update. Hi, I'm back with an update after a really busy week. I've been working with my attorney to prepare for the negotiations. Tessa and I will be meeting with the court-appointed mediator for both the divorce settlement and the custody case. I'm not too worried about the divorce itself, but the custody battle is stressing me out. Everyone keeps saying I'm being unreasonable about wanting full custody, but they don't understand the full picture. I know our son prefers me mostly because he spends more time with me, and he always has. Tessa has always tried to have a relationship with him on her terms, but we all know that's not how kids work. One of the most frustrating things this past week has been watching Tessa subtly act like a concerned mother. She's been posting on social media about how much she misses our son and how unfair it is that she can't see him, which isn't true. She's welcome to visit him anytime, but she hasn't tried. Several mutual friends have shared these posts, commenting about what a loving mother she is. The reality is different. Tessa doesn't even know our son's daily routine, his favorite foods, or his allergies. Just yesterday, she called asking if he still liked dinosaur-shaped nuggets. He hasn't eaten those in over a year because he's now obsessed with space-themed food. It's these little things that make me doubt her ability to be the primary caregiver. My attorney says we have a strong case because I've been consistently involved in our son's life, while Tessa's participation has been sporadic. We're preparing documentation of everything, from doctor appointments I've taken our son to parent-teacher conferences Tessa missed, to the daily routine I've maintained while working full-time. The financial situation is another mess. Tessa's lawyers sent over some paperwork, and they're contesting my request for the house. They argue that since it was a wedding gift from both families, it should be split equally. They conveniently ignore the fact that I've been the one paying for all the maintenance, repairs, and improvements over the years. What's really bothering me is the constant stream of messages from people who know our situation. Some of Tessa's gym clients have even reached out, saying how devastated she is and what a great person she's always been. It's like they're living in a different reality, where being charming at work automatically makes you a good wife and mother. The most surprising development has been my father-in-law's reaction. Unlike most of our friends who have taken Tessa's side, he actually called me and said he understood my decision. He told me he had similar issues with Tessa's mother early in their marriage, but he chose to stay and work through it. The tone in his voice when he said this told me everything I needed to know about how that worked out for him. My parents have been incredibly supportive through all of this. My dad has been helping me organize my financial documents, and my mom has been taking care of our son when I need to meet with lawyers or handle paperwork. Their support has made me realize just how lonely and unsupported I felt in my marriage. I'll be honest, the stress has been overwhelming at times. Last night, I almost reached for a cigarette for the first time since moving out, but I stopped myself. I realized I started smoking because I was unhappy in my marriage, not because I needed it. It's strange how clarity comes to you in moments like this. Tessa has been sending me long text messages late at night, ranging from angry accusations to emotional pleas. In her latest message, she wrote about how she's been watching cooking videos and learning how to do laundry properly. It would be almost funny if it weren't so sad. These are basic life skills she's only now deciding to learn at 28. Some mutual friends have started sending screenshots of Tessa's private social media posts, where she's sharing her side of the story. She's painting herself as a devoted wife, blindsided by a husband who never communicated his unhappiness. The comments are full of people calling me heartless and suggesting I might be having a midlife crisis. I had to laugh at that one. Apparently, at 35, I'm already in midlife crisis territory. My attorney advised me to document everything but not respond to any of these provocations. She says it's actually helpful for our case when Tessa shows this kind of manipulative behavior publicly. Still, it's hard not to feel attacked from all sides. The only thing keeping me grounded is seeing how much more relaxed our son has become since we moved to my parents' house. He's sleeping better, eating better, and seems generally happier. He still asks about his mom, of course, but he's not anxious like he was when we all lived together and tensions were high. I have my first mediation session scheduled for next week. My attorney has prepared me for what to expect, but I'm still nervous. Tessa's lawyer has already said they'll fight hard against my request for full custody, so I know it's going to be a tough process. Despite all the pressure and second-guessing from others, I feel more certain about my decision with each passing day. Living with my parents has reminded me what a supportive household feels like. I've been getting proper sleep for the first time in years, and starting to remember who I was before I got consumed by trying to make an impossible situation work. The next few weeks will be crucial as we start the formal proceedings. I'll update again after the mediation session, but for now, I just wanted to thank everyone who supported me in my original post. Your comments helped me stay strong when I was doubting myself the most. Update 2. Today, Tessa came to visit us at my parents' house. It's been a week and a half since my last update, and honestly, I was dreading this encounter. We had our mediation session scheduled for a few days from now, so this was probably our last informal meeting before the legal process begins. I expected it to be a confrontational visit, especially with all her emotional text messages lately. However, what happened today completely changed my perspective on several things. When I opened the door, Tessa was standing there, looking more put together than I've seen her in years. She was wearing a proper dress instead of her usual gym clothes, and she even brought a small gift bag for our son. What really struck me was her demeanor. There was none of the defensiveness or hostility I had been preparing for. She made small talk with my parents, something she rarely did even when we were married. She asked my mom about her garden and talked about local sports with my dad. It was awkward, yes, but strangely civil. After about 15 minutes of this surprisingly normal conversation, she asked if she could see our son. The way she asked wasn't a demand, but a request. It was such a departure from her usual behavior that it took me a moment to respond. Our son was playing in the living room when we walked in. The moment he saw Tessa, his entire face lit up. "Mommy," he shouted, abandoning his toys and running straight into her arms. I stood by the doorway, watching their interaction. Tessa had brought a new puzzle, one with spaceships, showing she had actually paid attention when I mentioned our son's new space obsession. In the custody paperwork, they sat together on the floor, and Tessa let our son take the lead in putting it together, something she'd never done before. Usually, she'd try to control the activity and get frustrated when he didn't follow her instructions exactly. What really got to me was hearing Tessa ask our son about his day, his friends at daycare, and his favorite parts of living at Grandma and Grandpa's house. She actually listened, to our son's rambling answers about the neighbor's cat and the treehouse in the backyard. I had never seen her engage with our son like this before. At one point, our son started telling Tessa about how I make his sandwiches in the shape of rockets now. Instead of making a sarcastic comment about my cooking skills, like she used to, Tessa asked our son to teach her how to make them. They spent the next 20 minutes in the kitchen with our son seriously instructing her on how to make rocket-shaped sandwiches. The real turning point came when our son asked when he could see her again. The hopeful look on both of their faces really hit me hard. Tessa didn't make any demands or try to manipulate the situation. She just looked at me, waiting for my response. After they finished playing, when it was time for Tessa to leave, our son gave her a big hug and asked her to come back tomorrow. Tessa looked at me questioningly, and without really thinking about it, I found myself nodding. Tessa and I talked briefly at the door before she left. There was none of her usual defensiveness. She admitted that she had been a bad mother so far. She said seeing how much our son had grown and changed in just these few weeks made her realize how much she'd missed by not being more involved. She told me she was ready to learn everything it would take to be a better mother, even if she couldn't be a better wife. She mentioned that she had hired a nanny to help her learn proper childcare techniques, and that she'd been taking parenting classes 3 times a week. She showed me the certificates on her phone, not to brag, but just to show me she was serious about this. She didn't try to convince me to come back, or make any big promises about changing. Instead, she just asked if I would reconsider the full custody arrangement. She suggested we could work out a schedule that would let her prove she could be a responsible parent while making sure our son's routine wasn't disrupted. After she left, I called my attorney and told her I no longer wanted to pursue full custody and would be open to discussing a joint custody arrangement. She reminded me of all the evidence we had showing Tessa's past lack of involvement, but I explained that I needed to give her a chance to be a better mother. Even though she hadn't been a good wife, the joy on our son's face today made me realize that while ending my marriage is the right decision, I don't have the right to end my son's relationship with his mother, especially now that Tessa is finally showing real signs of wanting to step up and be the mother our son deserves. The divorce negotiations have started, and surprisingly, things are going much smoother than I expected. Tessa and her lawyer have been very cooperative, which I think is her way of showing regret for her past behavior. We've begun discussing custody arrangements for our son. While nothing is final yet, we're thinking of having him spend half the month at my place and the other half at her place. That's what we're doing right now. He's supposed to go live with her in a couple of days. At first, I was nervous about this arrangement, but Tessa has really stepped up. She asked her mom to help her out, which has been a big relief. Even though our marriage ended, Tessa's been incredibly supportive, even more than some of my closest friends. She still calls me daily to check in and sends me pictures of the bedroom she's setting up for our son. The house situation has also been resolved more easily than I thought. Tessa agreed to sell it and split the proceeds 60-40 in my favor, acknowledging the extra work I put in over the years. Her lawyer even suggested this compromise, which shows they're trying to be fair. Tessa has also enrolled in a co-parenting course, something the mediator recommended but wasn't required. She's been sharing her progress with me through our new co-parenting app, which helps us keep track of schedules, appointments, and our son's activities without direct contact. The most surprising development has been how Tessa has embraced our son's space obsession. She's turned the spare room in her apartment into a mini planetarium, complete with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. She asked me for our son's bedtime routine and has been practicing it with her mom to make sure it's the same at both houses. I'm still seeing our son every few days when he's with Tessa because neither of us thinks it's good for him to go 2 weeks without seeing either parent. We've worked out a schedule where we alternate weekends and have dinner on Wednesdays with a parent who doesn't have him that week. The mediation sessions have been productive. Instead of going over old marriage problems, we've been focusing on practical co-parenting strategies. Tessa has been actively participating, taking notes, and asking good questions about things like school schedules, healthcare decisions, and holiday plans. We've set clear communication boundaries, no more late-night texts or social media drama. Everything goes through the co-parenting app or our lawyers. Tessa even deleted her previous posts about our situation and made a final update, saying we're working things out privately for our son's benefit. Tessa's mother has been an unexpected blessing through all of this. She's not only helping Tessa learn to parent, but she's also mediating between us when things get tense. Last week, when we disagreed about preschool options, she arranged a meeting with both sets of grandparents to discuss it calmly. We ended up finding a solution that worked for everyone. Our son seems to be adjusting well to the new arrangement. He's excited about having 2 rooms and 2 sets of toys, though we're trying to maintain some consistency by having his favorite stuffed animals travel with him between houses. He stopped asking when we're going home and now talks about mommy's house and daddy's house without any apparent distress. The financial aspects are being handled through our lawyers. We're setting up a joint account specifically for our son's expenses, with clear guidelines on what each of us will contribute and how the money can be used. Tessa suggested this herself, wanting to ensure transparency in our co-parenting financial responsibilities. Looking ahead, we have a detailed parenting plan that covers everything from education to medical decisions. We've even included guidelines for handling future relationships, agreeing to meet any potential new partners before introducing them to our son. I know we still have challenges ahead. This is just the beginning of our co-parenting journey, and there will be bumps along the way. But for the first time since this all started, I feel genuinely hopeful about our ability to put our son's needs first and work together as parents, even if we couldn't work together as spouses. Our son is happier than I've seen him in months, and that's what matters most. Tessa and I both understand now that being good co-parents is more important than holding on to past hurts. I'm grateful we've found a way to move forward that puts our son's well-being first, while allowing both of us to maintain meaningful relationships with him. Thank you all for your support and advice throughout this journey. Your comments helped me stay strong when I was doubting myself, and guided me toward making decisions that were best for me. This community has been an amazing source of support and advice for me and my son.